Get out! A black girl from Cloverdale wants a black belt. Derek Harlan did not even let her finish walking through the door. He watched her cross the floor in 6 steady steps, then snatched the registration form straight from her hand before she could set it on the counter. He scanned it for 3 seconds. Then he laughed. Short, sharp, the kind of laugh that carried no warmth, and held the paper up for the entire room to see. A black girl from Cloverdale wants a black belt. He dropped his voice into something slow and deliberate, the way someone speaks when they believe they are explaining something obvious to someone slow. Sweetheart, I have seen how y'all fight in the streets. That is not martial arts. That is just anger with no technique. And anger with no technique gets people hurt on my mat. He looked her up and down once, top to bottom. The way someone examines something they are already preparing to discard. You are not even worth a round. You would be a liability, an injury report waiting to happen. He dropped the form on the floor at her feet. Go find a dance studio that will take anyone with a pulse. This mat has standards. 30 people heard every word. Some laughed. A few stared at the floor. Maya Ellison looked at the form lying at her feet. Then she looked at the wall directly behind Harlan, at a framed photograph she recognized better than her own reflection. She bent down, picked up the form, folded it once, slipped it into her pocket, and said nothing. Because in 30 seconds, on the day that mattered, every single word Derek Harlan had just spoken would come back and bury him alive. Do not scroll past this one. Drop your location and the local time in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you are watching from. Stay with this story, because what Maya does next is something nobody in that room saw coming. And if this channel isn't in your subscriptions yet, fix that now. You will not want to miss what is coming. Savannah, Georgia sits close enough to the Atlantic that on certain mornings the air carries the faint scent of salt before you even open your eyes. The city is beautiful, in the way old things are beautiful, full of history, moss-covered squares, wrought iron gates, and wide boulevards where the light falls golden in the late afternoon. Cloverdale is not that part of Savannah. It sits on the southeast edge of the city, past the point where tourist maps stop printing street names. The roads crack and heave in summer. The streetlights work on a schedule nobody has ever figured out. The houses lean slightly, the way houses lean when they have stood too long, without anyone paying them proper attention. It is the kind of neighborhood defined by what it is missing. No grocery store within walking distance. No maintained park. No bus line running past 9 at night. Maya Ellison had lived there her entire life. She was 24 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, 131 pounds. She carried her father's jaw and her grandmother's eyes, sharp, patient in a way that people sometimes mistook for sadness. She was not sad. She was tired, which is a different thing entirely. Tired in the way you become when you have been holding everything up for so long that you stop noticing the weight. Her days began in the pre-dawn darkness with a shift at a warehouse on the south end of Savannah, scanning boxes and loading pallets for $1 above minimum wage. She worked through the morning and into the early afternoon. Then she went home, changed, ate whatever was in the refrigerator, and checked on her grandmother before heading back out. Cora Ellison was 74 and had been living with stage 3 chronic kidney disease for over a year. 3 times a week she sat in a dialysis center on Whitaker Street for 4 hours while a machine did the work her kidneys could no longer manage. Her insurance covered part of it. The uncovered portion came to $900 a month. Maya paid it. She paid it with a second job cleaning offices for a commercial janitorial company that serviced 3 buildings downtown. She started in the evening and often worked until well past midnight, 5 nights a week. She never missed a shift. She never asked for a day off. She took the bus both ways because the car she once owned had been sold when the first medical bills arrived. She had not complained about any of it. Not to Cora, who would have spent her remaining strength feeling responsible. Not to co-workers who carried their own burdens. And not to herself, because she had learned long ago that complaining to yourself is the most useless conversation a person can have. What she did instead was keep a photograph in her wallet. Small, worn, soft at the corners from years of handling. It showed a man in a white gi, broad-shouldered and calm-faced, standing on a tatami with his arms at his sides. Beside him, barely reaching his elbow, stood a 7-year-old girl, wearing a gi 3 sizes too large, grinning at the camera with one front tooth missing. The man was Shehan Earl Ellison. The girl was Maya. On the back, in her father's careful handwriting, were the words, "The mat always tells the truth." Earl Ellison had died 3 years earlier, from pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in January, gone by August. He was 58. He had never made much money. He had never owned a house. He had spent 30 years teaching in a basement dojo on Hartridge Street, charging what people could afford and waiving the fee entirely when they could afford nothing. He was the finest martial artist Maya had ever seen in her life. She had never told him that directly. She had always assumed there would be more time. There was not. After he died, she stopped competing. She kept training alone in the one-car garage behind Cora's house, beneath the overhead light that buzzed and flickered, and the heavy bag her father had hung from a ceiling beam years before. She trained late at night after the buses stopped running, after Cora was asleep. She wrapped her hands from memory and worked through every combination, every throw, every transition her father had ever taught her, because stopping entirely would have meant admitting something she was not yet ready to admit. But she did not enter tournaments. She did not step inside another dojo. Not once in 3 years. Until the medical bills arrived. The Georgia State Open Martial Arts Championship had been running for 11 years. The largest regional open-style tournament in the Southeast, drawing competitors from 6 states across 4 weight classes. First prize in the open division was $10,000. Alongside it came an $8,000 scholarship toward certified instructor training with a national athletics organization. $18,000 total, enough to cover Cora's dialysis for the next 20 months. Maya had found the flyer taped outside the dialysis center, between a notice about a missing cat and a business card for a tax preparer. She stood in front of it for a long time without reaching for it. To compete, a fighter needed official verification from a recognized affiliated dojo. The head instructor had to countersign the registration form and confirm the competitor's credentials in writing. There was only one affiliated dojo in all of Savannah, Harlan Martial Arts Academy. Maya took the flyer, folded it into her jacket pocket, and rode the bus home without a word to anyone. That night she opened the bottom drawer of her father's old dresser, kept locked since the day he died, and took out a small black notebook with a cracked spine. She turned to the last page, read the words written there once, slowly, then closed it, and held it against her chest in the dark for a long time. The following morning she walked into Harlan Academy. She did not walk back out the way she had expected. To understand what Maya Ellison carried onto that mat, you first have to understand the man who built her. Shehan Earl Ellison was not famous. He was not on television. He did not have a YouTube channel or a sponsorship deal or a wall covered in photographs of himself standing beside celebrities. He had a basement, a set of mats he had bought secondhand, and 30 years of knowledge that he gave away freely to anyone willing to show up. He had earned his 6th-degree black belt in judo through the United States Judo Federation, one of fewer than 40 people in the country to hold that rank at the time of his certification. He also held a 4th-degree black belt in Hapkido. He had been named USJF Instructor of the Year, received the award in a hotel ballroom in Atlanta, thanked the committee in 4 quiet sentences, and never mentioned it again. The certificate went into his desk drawer the following morning and stayed there until the day he died. When people asked why he did not display it, he gave the same answer every time. The students do not come here to see my paper. They come here to learn. Those are two different things. His dojo had no sign. Ellison Martial Arts operated out of the basement of Second Baptist Church on Hartridge Street, with the pastor's permission. The ceiling was low. The lighting was institutional. In summer, it held heat like a kiln. In winter, the old radiator in the corner knocked and hissed through every session. Earl charged $20 a month for children and $30 for adults. If a student could not pay, he did not ask twice. He simply said, "Come back Thursday," and left it there. He had trained more than 200 students over 3 decades. Most of them had no interest in competition. They were nurses, mechanics, teachers, teenagers from Cloverdale and surrounding neighborhoods who needed somewhere safe to go after school. Earl gave them that. He gave them technique, yes, but more than that, he gave them a vocabulary for their own bodies, a sense that they were capable of more than the world around them had ever suggested. Among all of them, Maya was different. Earl recognized it the first time he put her on the mat at 4 years old, holding her small hands and walking her through a basic breakfall. She had no fear of falling. Most children flinch when the ground comes up. Maya went down, slapped the mat the way he showed her, and looked up grinning. "Again," she said. He trained her for 17 years. By the time she was 18, she had earned her first-degree black belt in judo. By 20, she held a second degree. At 22, she completed her Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, a process that typically takes a decade, which she finished in 8 years because she trained 6 days a week without being asked. Earl called her the most technically complete student he had ever produced. He wrote that in the black notebook he kept on his desk, in the column next to her name, in ink that had faded slightly over the years. The notebook itself was a record of every student he had ever taught. Names, enrollment dates, belt levels, notable observation. He had started it in 1995 with 17 entries and filled it steadily until the year he died. It was not organized by skill or achievement. It was organized by date of first attendance, because Earl believed that showing up was the most important thing a person could do and deserved to be recorded first. Maya kept the notebook after he died. She kept it in the bottom drawer of his old dresser, alongside the things she had not been able to bring herself to sort through. His worn hand wraps, his reading glasses, a folded program from a tournament he had refereed years before. She had not opened it in 2 years. The last entry in the notebook was written 4 days before Earl was moved to hospice care. It was not about a student. It was about Maya. She is ready. She has been ready since she was 22. Everything she needs, she already has. She just needs one reason to walk back in. When that reason comes, and it will come, she will not hesitate. That is not the kind of person I raised. Below that, in slightly shakier handwriting, as if added a day later, the mat always tells the truth. I taught her that. She believed it. That is enough. For 3 years after his death, Maya trained alone in the garage. No audience, no sparring partner, no coach, just the buzzing overhead light, the bag and the muscle memory her father had spent 17 years building into her body. She drilled throws against a grappling dummy until the mat beneath it was dark with sweat. She ran combinations until her knuckles ached through the wraps. She did not do it to stay sharp for competition. She did it because it was the only place left where she could still hear his voice. Keep your hips low. Do not telegraph the entry. Trust your base. When she opened the notebook the night she found the tournament flyer and read those final words in the lamplight of Cora's bedroom, she sat still for a long time. Then she put the notebook back in the drawer, carefully, like setting something down that she intended to pick back up. The following morning, she got on the bus, rode 14 stops north, and pushed open the glass door of Heroine Martial Arts Academy. She brought her credentials. She brought her registration form. She brought the photograph from her wallet tucked against her chest. She did not yet know that inside that building, hanging on a wall she had never seen, was a face she had known her entire life. Derek Harlan had been in the martial arts business for 15 years, and in that time he had developed a precise understanding of the difference between a student and a customer. Students were unpredictable. They asked hard questions. They challenged technique. They sometimes outgrew their instructor and had the honesty to say so. Customers renewed their membership on the first of every month and told their friends. Harlan preferred customers. His academy occupied a renovated commercial space on Abercorn Street. High ceilings, climate control. New mats replaced every 3 years. A reception desk staffed during all operating hours. The website described it as Georgia's premier martial arts training center. The photographs on the website showed smiling students in clean white jais, arranged in rows by belt rank, standing in front of the Harlan Academy banner. Not a single face in those photographs looked like Maya Ellison's. That was not an accident. Harlan held a 4th-degree black belt certified through a private regional federation that he had helped found, and whose certification process he had also helped design. He had competed in his 20s with moderate success, a handful of regional titles, 1 state championship in a division with 4 entrants. He was technically competent. He understood mechanics. He could teach fundamentals to beginners and intermediate students without issue. What Derek Harlan could not do was what the best martial artists can always do: adapt in real time under pressure against someone who was genuinely better than him. He had not been tested that way in years. He had made certain of it the morning Maya walked in. Harlan was running a class of 12 intermediate students through a drilling sequence when he saw her come through the door. He did what he always did when someone new entered. He assessed. 1 look, top to bottom, 2 seconds, conclusion filed. He crossed the floor, took the form from her hand before she had finished extending it. What followed was what Maya had already lived through. The form dropped at her feet, the words loud enough for the room. Not even worth a round. Go find a dance studio that will take anyone with a pulse. This mat has standards. After Maya left, Harlan turned back to his class. Nobody spoke. He picked up where he had left off with the drilling sequence, as if nothing had happened. That evening he posted to the Academy's Instagram story without using Maya's name. He was careful about that, always careful in the specific way people are careful when they know exactly what they are doing. A vague caption, a knowing tone. Some people walk in expecting a trophy just for showing up. Standards exist for a reason. A laughing emoji at the end. 1,200 people liked it within 2 hours. What Harlan did not notice, what he had never once thought to notice in the 5 years that photograph had hung on his wall, was the framed image on the east side of the main training room, hung between a mounted trophy case and a whiteboard schedule. It was a black and white photograph, 8 by 10, in a simple dark frame. It showed a man in a GI standing on a competition mat, arms at his sides, expression composed. It was the kind of photograph that read as atmosphere, a piece of martial arts heritage, the sort of image purchased from a stock archive or a memorabilia catalog, to give a space the feeling of tradition and depth. Harlan had bought it 7 years earlier from an online seller who described it as vintage American judo competition era. He had paid $32, including shipping. He had hung it there because the wall needed something, and he thought it looked right. He had never known who was in the photograph. His business partner knew. Damon Reeves had been teaching at Harlan Academy for several years. He had joined the staff after a decade of competing regionally. Drawn to the position by the facility, the salary, and the promise of a head instructor role that had never fully materialized. He was 39, quiet, meticulous, the kind of man who noticed things other people walked past without looking at. When Maya Ellison walked into the academy that morning, and Harlan took the form from her hand, Damon was in the back office, reviewing enrollment paperwork. He heard the exchange through the open door. He did not come out. He had learned over the years when involvement would help and when it would only make things worse. But when Maya glanced at the east wall before she left, when her eyes found the framed photograph and stayed there a fraction of a second longer than a person looks at wallpaper, Damon saw it. He recognized that look. It was the look of someone seeing a face they knew in a place they did not expect to find it. He waited until the evening class ended, and everyone had gone. Then, he stood in front of the photograph, alone for the first time in a long time, and looked at it the way he should have looked at it years earlier. The man in the photograph was standing on a competition mat at what appeared to be a regional tournament. In the background, slightly out of focus, was a banner that read, "Georgia Judo Championships." Damon had competed in that tournament. He had been 17, a junior division entry eliminated in the second round by a throw so clean and so fast that he had stood up afterward and looked around the room as if something had been taken from him that he did not know how to name. The man who threw him that day was Earl Ellison. Damon stood in front of the photograph for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number he had not called in almost 2 years. It rang 3 times. "Damon," said the voice on the other end. "I was wondering when you would call." Damon Reeves found Maya in the parking lot. She was standing beside the bus stop at the end of the block. Not sitting, just standing with her hands in her jacket pockets and her eyes on the middle distance. The registration form was still folded in her pocket. She had not unfolded it since she left the building. Damon came up beside her quietly. He was not a man who announced himself. "Your father trained me," he said. No preamble, no apology for following her out. "A couple of years after I started. I had been training for 4 years by then. Thought I knew more than I did." He paused. "He fixed that in about 3 sessions. Most patient teacher I ever had, and the most technically honest." He looked at her. "He was the best I ever learned from. I want you to know that." Maya looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, brief and controlled. "Thank you," she said. "Your credentials are valid," Damon said. "More than valid. I looked up your USJF registration from my phone before you reached the door. Everything checks out." He glanced back toward the building. "Come back tomorrow morning before Harlan gets in. I will process your paperwork myself." Maya studied him. "He will cancel it." "He cannot," Damon said. "My name is on the operating license as co-instructor of record. I have equal authority to approve competitive registrations. He knows that. He just hopes most people do not." The following morning, Maya returned early. Damon had the forms ready. He countersigned them, affixed the academy stamp, and filed the copies before Harlan arrived. When Harlan saw the completed paperwork on his desk, he stood in the doorway of his office for a long moment without speaking. Then he walked to his class and said nothing about it for the rest of the day. But something shifted in how he looked at Maya during sessions. Harlan was a man who did not tolerate situations he could not control, and so, when he found one, he found a way to reframe it. He could not remove her. He could not discredit her paperwork. What he could do was make her useful in a different way. The second class Maya attended was a Wednesday evening session. 31 students, a mixed intermediate and advanced group. Harlan was running stand-up techniques, partner drills, controlled sparring in the final 30 minutes. Halfway through the session, he stopped the class. "Ellison," he said, loud across the room, "let us see what you have got. You and Cole, center mats." It was not phrased as an invitation. Cole Brennan was 23, 6 feet 1, 190 pounds. He held a first-degree black belt that Harlan had issued personally after 2 years of training. Fast promotion by most standards. Though nobody inside the academy said that out loud. Cole was the kind of student who trained hard enough to be genuinely skilled and confidently enough to confuse skill with dominance. He had won 3 local tournaments in the past year and a half. He walked to the center mat with the comfortable stride of a man who had never been seriously challenged in his own building. Before they began, Cole took his time. He rolled his neck slowly, each side 2 rotations. Then his shoulders forward and back. Then he dropped into a deep hip flexor stretch, one knee on the mat, arms overhead, held it for a full 12 seconds, exhaled loudly. Then he stood, shook out his legs one at a time, rolled his wrists, bounced on his toes 4 times. In the back row, a 15-year-old student named Darnell leaned toward the kid beside him and whispered, barely audible, "Why is he stretching like he is going to fight a bear?" The kid beside him pressed his lips together and looked at the ceiling. At the edge of the mat, Damon Reeves turned slightly toward the wall and coughed once into his fist. Cole stepped toward Maya. He dropped his voice low. Not quite a whisper, just quiet enough to be deniable. "I will give you 30 seconds before you tap," he said. "That is me being generous." Maya did not respond. She looked past him for a brief moment toward the east wall of the training room, toward the framed photograph that hung between the trophy case and the schedule board. The calm face, the white jai, the arms at the sides. Then she turned back to Cole, settled her weight, and waited. Harlan crossed his arms. He nodded once to a student near the edge of the room who had his phone in his hand. The student raised it slightly and pressed record. "Let us see," Harlan said quietly enough for only the front row to hear. "What Earl Ellison really taught you." The room went still. 31 people held their positions. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning unit above the back door and the soft tap of Maya's bare feet settling on the mat. She did not look at Harlan. She did not look at the camera. She looked at Cole Brennan, and she waited with the particular stillness of someone who already knows how the next few minutes are going to go and is simply allowing them to arrive. Cole moved first. 90 seconds. That was how long it lasted. And in those 90 seconds, Cole Brennan did not land a single meaningful strike. He came in fast at the start, which was his habit. Pressure, early established dominance. Let the other person feel the weight of his forward movement. He threw a sharp jab combination, followed by a level change, reaching for a double-leg takedown. It was technically sound. It was the sequence he had used to finish his last 2 tournament matches. Maya was not there when he arrived. She had not stepped back. She had moved laterally 1 step at precisely the moment his weight committed forward and his hands closed on empty air. He recovered quickly. He was athletic enough for that and pivoted to face her. She was already reset, balanced, watching him with the same expression she had worn before the round began. He tried again. A low kick to the outside of her lead leg followed by a cross. The kick landed on her thigh with a dull sound. She absorbed it without shifting her weight and rolled the cross over her shoulder, redirecting his arm past her ear. His momentum carried him a half-step forward. Her left hand brushed his back as he passed, not grabbing, not pushing, just there, measuring. He understood by the third exchange that something was wrong. Not wrong in a way he could name immediately. Wrong in the way the floor feels wrong when you step onto ice expecting concrete. Every angle he chose, she was already occupying the correct counter position before he could establish the attack. She was not reacting, she was reading. There was a full second of difference between those two things, and, in a 90-second sparring round, that second is everything. He pushed harder, a spinning back kick, his best technique, the one that had gotten him the loudest reactions in his tournament highlight videos. He loaded his weight onto his left leg, coiled, launched. Maya stepped inside of the rotation. His foot passed 6 inches behind her shoulder. She felt the air move against the back of her neck, and she was already past it, already in his blind spot. Her hand rested briefly on his arm as he came back around, not holding, not locking, just resting, as if marking where she had been. Cole stopped moving for half a second. That was not something he did. Then Maya stepped back, 1 clear step backward out of range. She lowered her hands to her sides. She turned slightly toward him, inclined her head. A brief, precise bow, the kind Earl Ellison had drilled into her from the time she was 6 years old. The kind that meant, the round is finished, and I thank you for it. She had ended it herself without being told. The room was silent for 4 full seconds. Then, Harlan uncrossed his arms and raised his voice. "Cole was going easy," he said. The words came quickly, with the practiced ease of a man who had prepared them before the round began. Controlled sparring. That is the point of a drill. It does not prove anything. He clapped once, sharp and authoritative. Reset. Next pair. Nobody moved immediately. There was a particular quality to the silence, not the silence of agreement, but the silence of people who were thinking something they had not yet decided whether to say. Then, the room began to reorganize itself, and the moment passed. What Harlan did not see, because he was already turning back toward the center of the mat, was a 16-year-old student named Imani Washington, lowering her phone from eye level and quietly pressing stop. Imani had joined Harlan Academy 8 months earlier, with her mother's careful savings and a hope that the place would be what the website described. It was mostly fine. The instruction was adequate. The environment was manageable. But she had been watching Derek Harlan run his dojo for 8 months, and she had noticed certain things. And when Maya Ellison had walked in 2 weeks earlier and been spoken to the way Harlan had spoken to her, Imani had decided, without consciously deciding, that she was going to pay close attention. She had filmed every second of the 90-second round from the corner of the room, phone angled low. That night, sitting on her bed with her homework unfinished beside her, she posted the video to TikTok. She did not add a caption with analysis. She did not name anyone. She typed 7 words. This happened at my dojo today. Then she put her phone down and went to sleep. By 6 the following morning, the video had 240,000 views. Comments filled faster than the platform could load them. Who is she? Where did she train? Did he really say that before the round? Why did the instructor shut it down so fast? Share this. Someone find her name. This needs to be seen. By 9, Harlan had seen it. He called Imani into his office before the first class of the day. His voice was controlled and quiet and very precise, the way voices get when anger has been disciplined into something more dangerous than shouting. He told her the video violated the Academy's media policy. He told her it misrepresented a routine training exercise. He told her it needed to come down immediately, or her enrollment would be reviewed. Imani deleted the original. By then, 314 people had already saved and reposted it. That afternoon, Harlan called Adrian Soto at the tournament office. The conversation was brief and one-sided. Harlan spoke about credential irregularities, about liability concerns, about the reputation of the event. Soto listened. At the end of the call, he said he would look into it. 2 days later, Maya received an email during her night cleaning shift. Official tournament letterhead. Competitive registration suspended pending credential review. She read it twice in the empty corridor of the 3rd-floor office building, the vacuum cleaner running behind her. Then she turned the screen off and stood very still for a moment in the buzzing fluorescent light. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. Ms. Ellison. The voice was clear, unhurried, professional. My name is Simone Parker. I am an attorney based in Savannah. I have been trying to reach you since this morning. A brief pause. I think you should hear what I have to say before you respond to that email. Simone Parker was 41 and had been practicing civil rights and sports law for 14 years. She had a reputation in Savannah for taking cases other attorneys found inconvenient and for winning them with a thoroughness that made opposing counsel reluctant to face her a second time. She had also, for 2 years, trained at Ellison Martial Arts on Hartridge Street. She had been 22 at the time, a second-year law student with 3 evenings a week free and a desire to learn something that had nothing to do with case law. She had found Earl Ellison's basement dojo through a flyer at a laundromat. She had walked in expecting a basic self-defense class and discovered instead a man who taught movement the way good teachers teach everything, by asking you to understand why before he showed you how. When she stopped training at the end of those 2 years, she tried to pay the fees she had deferred. Earl refused. You showed up every time, he told her. That is the only thing I asked. She had not forgotten that. Some things sit in a person for 20 years and do not diminish. When Imani's video appeared on her timeline, shared by a former client who tagged it with 2 words, "Is this legal?" Simone had watched it 4 times before she recognized something in the way Maya Ellison moved. A particular quality of hip placement on the lateral step, the way the hands settled after a redirect, not dropped, not raised, just present. She had seen that specific combination of habits exactly once before in her life. She had called Cora Ellison's landline the same afternoon. Cora answered on the second ring. When Simone explained who she was and how she knew Earl, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Cora said, "Hold on, I need to get something." They met 2 evenings later, Simone, Maya, and Cora, at the kitchen table in Cora's house on the edge of Cloverdale. Cora set a padded envelope on the table, yellowed along one edge, sealed with tape that had dried and gone brittle. Maya's name was written on the front in her father's handwriting. "He gave this to me 2 weeks before they moved him to hospice," Cora said. Her voice was steady in the way old voices get steady. Not without feeling, but past the point where feeling spills over. "He said, keep it until Maya needs it. He said she would know when." Maya looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then she opened it. The first document was a certification letter from the United States Judo Federation. It confirmed the promotion of Shehan Earl Ellison to 6th degree black belt, with commendation for 22 years of active instruction and contribution to the development of competitive judo in the Southeast. It bore the official Federation seal and the signature of the national director. The second was a citation from the Georgia State Athletic Commission, recognizing Ellison Martial Arts as a distinguished community training program, and Earl Ellison personally for 2 decades of youth development work. The third document was a single sheet of paper, handwritten with the heading Students of Note, Shehan Earl Ellison, Ellison Martial Arts, Hartridge Street, Savannah, Georgia, 12 names, dates of enrollment, belt ranks issued, a brief notation beside each. Simone Parker put her finger on the first name at the top of the list. Derek T. Harlan, enrolled in the fall, 1st degree black belt in judo, issued under Earl Ellison certification and Federation seal a couple of years later. Promotion witnessed by D. Reeves and D. Osei. Maya read the name, read it again, set the paper down on the table, and sat back in her chair. "He knew," she said. "Not a question." "He knew the whole time," Simone said. Derek Harlan's 4th degree certification had come later through the private federation he co-founded. But his first black belt, the foundation of everything he had built, had been issued by the man he had publicly dismissed as an informal instructor, with no recognized standing. Simone reached into her bag and placed one more item on the table. It was a check, a personal check drawn on Earl Ellison's account, made out to Derek T. Harlan from years earlier. The amount was $240, the equivalent of 8 months of deferred training fees. In the memo line, in Earl's handwriting, balance owed return per student withdrawal. Paper clipped to the back of the check was a small note card. 4 lines in the same careful hand. Derek left before completing the advanced curriculum. Withdrew without notice in the fall. Refund prepared. Held in case he returns to finish. The check had never been cashed. Earl Ellison had kept it in his files for 18 years, waiting for a student who never came back. Maya stared at that note card for a long time. At the 4 lines. At the patience contained in them. The specific, patient quality of a man who believed that people could be better than their worst moments, and who kept a door open for them, long after they had stopped deserving it. Cora put her hand over Maya's on the table. Neither of them spoke. "There is one more thing," Simone said. She had her phone in her hand. "I called Damon Reeves this afternoon. His name is on the witness line of the promotion certificate. I asked him if he remembered the day." She pressed play. Damon's voice came through the speaker, clear and even. "September 12, 2005. Hartridge Street basement. I was standing 3 feet from Shehan Ellison when he tied that belt around Derek Harlan's waist. Harlan shook his hand. He said, "Thank you." Shehan Ellison told him to come back for the advanced session the following month. A pause. He never did. Cora squeezed Maya's hand once. Her eyes were dry, but her grip was firm. "Your daddy knew this day would come," she said quietly. "That is why he kept records." Maya sat with that for a moment. Then she looked at Simone. "What do we do now?" Simone closed her folder. Her voice was the voice of someone who had already decided, in the quiet hours before this meeting, exactly how this was going to go. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "I call Adrian Soto, and this time I am not asking him to review anything." She paused. "I am notifying him of what happens next if he does not." Simone Parker called Adrian Soto at 8:15 the following morning. The call lasted 11 minutes. She did not raise her voice at any point. She did not make threats in the language of threats. She simply presented information in the order it needed to be presented. The USJF certification, the student record, the witness confirmation from Damon Reeves. And then she told Soto, with the particular clarity she reserved for moments when clarity was the most powerful available tool, exactly what the alternative looked like. The alternative looked like a civil rights filing against the Georgia State Open Martial Arts Championship for facilitating the discriminatory removal of a credentialed black competitor based on false claims submitted by a sponsor with a documented conflict of interest. It looked like a press release to every sports media outlet in the Southeast. It looked like Imani's video, now approaching 400,000 views across its reposted versions, playing on a loop in every story written about the tournament for the next calendar year. The registration was reinstated before 9. Soto sent the confirmation email himself. Harlan received the forwarded copy at 9:17. He read it standing at his desk, set his phone face down on the surface, and walked to his office window. He stood there for a while, looking at the parking lot below. Damon Reeves passed in the hallway, saw him through the glass, and kept walking without slowing down. The Georgia State Open Martial Arts Championship took place on a Saturday in a convention center on the west side of Savannah that smelled of floor wax and industrial coffee. The main competition hall seated 1,500. By 10 in the morning, every seat was taken. Another 100 people stood along the back wall. The tournament's official live stream showed 28,000 concurrent viewers before the first match of the day had even begun. Maya arrived alone. Simone had offered to come. Damon had offered to come. She had thanked both of them and said no. She took the bus, walked 4 blocks from the stop, checked in at the registration table, and found an empty corridor's bench to wrap her hands. She wrapped them with Earl's hand wraps. White cotton faded to the color of old paper, fraying at 2 edges, cherries, too large for her hands by a small margin. She wrapped them anyway, fold by fold, the way he had shown her at age 7. She put on her jai, plain white, no embroidery, no academy name on the back, and around her waist she tied her father's 2nd-degree black belt. Washed so many times the color had gone soft, the fabric carrying the particular weight that only years of honest use can give a thing. She walked into the competition hall. Nobody announced her. She moved through the preliminary rounds with the same quality she had shown in the Harlan sparring session. Controlled, efficient, nothing performed, 3 matches before the final. The longest lasted 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The shortest ended before the minute mark. The final was Maya Ellison versus Cole Brennan. Harlan had not arranged the bracket. The draw was random, as it always was. Cole had earned his way to the final on his own. He arrived at the center mat in full Harlan Academy gi, navy blue with silver trim, the Academy name across the back in block letters. He looked composed. He was genuinely composed. He was a skilled fighter, and he had spent the 2 weeks since the sparring session training harder than he had trained in the previous 6 months. because something about those 90 seconds had settled in him like a splinter he could not locate. Maya stepped to center mat. The murmuring in the crowd lasted 4 seconds and then went quiet. The referee raised his hand. Both competitors bowed. Cole came in with a grip fight, both hands reaching for collar and sleeve control, trying to establish dominant grips before she could. His grip training was strong. Against most opponents, he won that exchange in the first 3 seconds, and the match was functionally decided. Maya let him find her left collar. The moment his right hand closed on the fabric, she turned her hip, stepped her right foot across his center line, and secured his sleeve. It happened in under 2 seconds. He felt his balance shift before his brain registered why. Her right shoulder dropped, her hips loaded and drove through. Ippon Seoi Naj, a shoulder throw drilled 10,000 times on a cold basement mat since the age of 7. Cole's feet left the ground at the 18-second mark. He was airborne for less than a second. His back met the mat with a sound that carried to the back of the hall. Flat, absolute, the sound of mass meeting surface, without resistance. Maya was already moving. The transition from throw to groundwork took 4 seconds. Hips through, arm isolated, extension applied with steady, even pressure. At 24 seconds, Cole felt the joint reach its limit. At 29 seconds, his free hand struck the mat twice. The referee stepped in. Ippon. At the scoring table, the official looked at his stopwatch, then at his score sheet, then at his stopwatch again. He picked up his pen, wrote the time, paused, crossed it out, and wrote it again. He underlined it once. The man sitting directly behind him in the front row had watched all of it. He leaned to his left and said quietly to the woman beside him, "Did he just fact-check his own stopwatch?" She had already started clapping before anyone else in the hall caught up. Then 1,500 people stood up at once, and the sound filled every corner of the room from floor to ceiling. Maya stood at center mat. She bowed to Cole, to the referee, to the table. She touched her father's belt once with her fingertips. One brief, deliberate contact, and walked off the mat to the nearest bench and sat down. Across the hall, Derek Harlan was already moving toward the tournament microphone. The live stream moderator had switched the floor microphone to active feed at the start of the final match and had not switched it off. It was a procedural oversight, the kind that happens at live events when attention is on the competition floor and the technical checklist falls a step behind. On most days, it would have had no consequences. On this particular day, Derek Harlan walked toward that microphone with his tournament credential lanyard around his neck and his assistant 2 steps behind him. Before he reached the stand, he turned slightly and said in a voice meant for a 3-foot conversation, "How do I look? Is my collar straight?" 28,000 people heard it at the same time. The live stream comment section, which had been scrolling steadily for the past hour, underwent a sudden change in character. Harlan is worried about his collar right now. The man's entire world is on fire, and he is asking about his collar. Collargate, sir. Sir, the collar is genuinely the least of your problems tonight. Harlan reached the microphone, adjusted it to his height, and began to speak. His voice was measured, controlled. The voice of a man who had rehearsed this at least partially, and who understood that tone mattered as much as content. "I would like to raise a formal objection to the result of the Open Division Final," he said. "The competing fighters' credentials originate from an unaffiliated training program operating without recognized federation standing. The techniques demonstrated are not consistent with any certified curriculum. This tournament has an obligation to its competitors and sponsors to maintain standards, and those standards require..." The voice came from the competition floor. Cole Brennan was still on the mat, towel in one hand, weight on one leg, body not yet fully convinced it was done with the last 30 seconds. He was looking directly at Harlan across the hall. "Stop," he said. Not loudly, not with anger, just clearly. The way someone says a word when they mean only that word and nothing attached to it. "Aisha beat me fair. I felt every second of it. The throw was clean. The transition was clean. I tapped because I was caught, and I knew it. He paused. Everyone in this building watched the same match I did. The hall went silent in the specific way it goes silent when something unexpected and true has been said in a public space. Not the silence of shock, but the silence of recognition, of people feeling a thing they already knew being confirmed out loud. Harlan's mouth stayed open for a moment. Then it closed. He had prepared for resistance from the table, for legal friction from Simone, for pushback from Soto. He had not prepared for Cole Brennan, his best student, his most visible competitor, the face of his academy's marketing for 2 years, standing on a competition mat in front of 1,500 people and telling him to stop. Before Harlan could respond, Damon Reeves was at the secondary microphone near the scoring table. "My name is Damon Reeves," he said. "I am an instructor of record at Harlan Academy. I have been on staff there for several years." He looked at Harlan steadily across the room. "Derek, I was present on that day at Ellison Martial Arts on Hartridge Street in Savannah, Georgia. I watched Sheehan Earl Ellison tie your first-degree black belt around your waist. You shook his hand. You said thank you. His name was on your certification. His federation seal was on your paperwork. I signed that document as a witness." He let that sit for a moment. "That is the same man whose credentials you asked this tournament to reject." Simone Parker was already at the presentation screen. A technician she had briefed that morning connected her laptop without being asked twice. 3 documents appeared on the display, enlarged side by side. The first, Earl Ellison's USJF 6th degree certification. The second, the student record. Derek T. Harlan, 1st degree black belt, issued under Earl Ellison, witnessed by D. Reeves and D. Osei. The third, 2 signed complaint forms from former Harlan Academy students, both black, both describing instances of denied advancement and unexplained removal from programs. Both had accepted financial settlements in exchange for silence. Both had recently decided that silence was no longer something they were willing to hold. The screen sat in the full light of the hall, visible to 1,500 people in the room and 28,000 watching from wherever they were in the world. Harlan stood at the microphone. He said nothing. The color had gone out of his face in the way it goes when the body redirects its resources toward something more urgent than appearance. His hands at his sides were very still. Adrian Soto stepped to the main microphone. "The result of the Open Division final stands," he said. "Maya Ellison is the Georgia State Open champion." A brief pause, directed briefly toward Harlan. "Harlan Academy's tournament affiliation is suspended, effective immediately pending a full review of the credential complaint process and the conduct described in the documentation just entered into the record." He stepped back. Harlan replaced the microphone in its stand. He turned and walked toward the exit corridor, the crowd parting in front of him without sound. At the corridor entrance, mounted on the tournament's historical display board, was a framed photograph, part of the martial arts heritage display that Adrian Soto assembled each year from archival materials. Earl Ellison, white G, competition mat, enlarged this year to 16 by 20. Name printed clearly beneath it for the first time. Sheehan Earl Ellison, USJF Instructor of the Year. Ellison Martial Arts, Savannah, Georgia. Harlan stopped in front of it. He stood there for 3 seconds, perhaps 4, long enough for 2 people nearby to notice and look at each other without speaking. Then he walked through the corridor door, and it closed behind him. And that was the last time Derek Harlan stood on a competition floor in the state of Georgia. Simone's phone rang before she had crossed the hall. She looked at the screen, a number she recognized from 2 previous cases, a national martial arts governing body. She answered. "Ms. Parker," said the voice, "we have been watching the live stream. We would like to discuss something, not about Mr. Harlan." A brief pause. "About Ms. Ellison." The money arrived on a Tuesday, $10,000 from the Georgia State Open, transferred to the account Simone had set up during the week following the tournament. Alongside it, the $8,000 scholarship confirmation, certified instructor training, 12-month program, start date flexible. Maya was at the dialysis center when the notification came through on her phone. Cora was in her chair beside the machine, a magazine open on her lap that she was not really reading. Maya sat in the adjacent chair, the way she always sat, close enough to reach her hand, far enough not to crowd her. She looked at the notification, then she turned the phone face down on her knee and sat with it for a moment. Then she took Cora's hand. Her grandmother looked up from the magazine. She read Maya's face the way she had been reading it for 20 years. "It is done," Maya said. Cora turned her hand over and held Maya's properly, fingers interlaced. "I know," she said quietly. "I could tell this morning." They sat like that for the rest of the session, the machine running its steady rhythm beside them, the afternoon light moving slowly through the window. And neither of them needed to say anything more. What happened to Derek Harlan did not happen in a single day. It unfolded the way structural damage unfolds, quietly at first, then with a momentum that could not be slowed. His two primary sponsors sent termination letters within 72 hours of the live stream. One cited reputational concerns. The other cited the discrimination complaints directly in writing, in language that made clear legal counsel had been involved before the letter was sent. A third sponsor removed the Harlan Academy logo from their website without announcement or explanation. The Georgia State Athletic Commission opened a formal review the following week. The United States Judo Federation, made aware of the credential documentation Simone had presented, initiated a separate inquiry into the regional certification body that Harlan had helped found, the one that had issued his 4th-degree black belt and whose certification standards he had personally helped design. Students left, not all at once and not all for the same reason. Some had watched the live stream, some had heard about it from people who had, some had simply been waiting, without knowing they were waiting, for a reason to go somewhere else. 91 students withdrew their enrollment in the first month. The academy operated at a fraction of its capacity through the following months, running classes for smaller and smaller groups in a building whose lease payment remained fixed regardless of how many people showed up. Harlan Martial Arts Academy closed its doors several months after the tournament. A notice appeared in the window on a Wednesday morning. The equipment was listed for sale. The lease was surrendered. The Instagram account posted nothing after the week of the tournament and eventually disappeared entirely. Damon Reeves had left the week following the event. He wrote a resignation letter that was 2 sentences long and left it on Harlan's desk on a Monday morning when the building was empty. He did not ask for a reference. He spent the following month looking at commercial spaces and running numbers. By the end of it, he had signed a lease on a ground-floor unit on Price Street. Modest square footage, good floor-to-ceiling height for throws. He put the mats down himself over 2 weekends, with help from 3 former Harlan students who had followed him out without being asked. He offered the head instructor position to Maya Ellison. She accepted on one condition: 2 free class sessions per week for students who could not afford enrollment. Damon told her that had already been written into the plan. Before they opened, Damon drove to the former Harlan Academy building. The space had been cleared, the keys returned. Most of the mounted items had been taken or discarded. The framed photograph of Earl Ellison on the east wall had been left behind, treated as part of the building's decor, nobody's particular property. Damon took it down, wrapped it in a moving blanket, and drove it across town. He gave it to Maya on the morning they opened the new dojo. She held it in both hands for a moment, turning it slightly in the light. Then she walked to the center of the mat and set it down flat against the far wall at floor level. Not hung, not elevated, not displayed behind glass. just present at the same height as everyone who would train in that room, as if he were simply sitting there watching, the way he used to sit in the corner of the Hartridge Street basement and watch without interrupting when the work was going well. The dojo was named Ellison Reeves Martial Arts. The sign went up on a Thursday. By the following Saturday, 18 students arrived for the first class. Half a year after the tournament, Cora Ellison came to the dojo one afternoon. She walked slowly with her cane, the way she had walked since the second round of treatments. But she walked. Maya met her at the entrance and went with her through the main room and to the edge of the mat. The afternoon light came through the east windows in long pale angles across the tatami. Earl's photograph sat against the far wall, the white G catching the light the same way it always had. Cora looked at it for a moment. Then she looked around the room. The mats, the hung equipment, the framed class schedule, the particular smell of a working gym that builds over time and does not leave. She leaned slightly toward Maya. "You smell like his gym," she said. Maya looked at her grandmother. The set of her jaw, the steadiness behind her eyes, the thing people who had known Earl Ellison recognized without being able to name it. "Good," Maya said. Not long after that, on a Saturday morning as spring began to bloom, 20 students stood in 2 rows on the Ellison Reeves tatami. Different ages, different sizes. Every background the city of Savannah held between its old streets and its cracked sidewalks and its moss-covered squares that the tourist maps remembered and the ones they did not. Maya stood in front of them, Earl's black belt around her waist, soft with years, honest with use, carrying the weight of every session it had witnessed since the day he first tied it on. She looked at them for a moment without speaking. Then she spoke. "The mat does not care how you look, where you are from, or what anyone told you before you walked in here. It only knows what you do when you are standing on it." She let that settle for one breath. "So, let us begin. Some people will throw your name on the floor, the way Harlan threw that registration form, publicly, confidently, without apology. What they cannot account for is what you carry inside you. What patient hands placed there over years of quiet, honest work. Dignity does not ask for permission. It does not need an audience. It only needs one thing, the willingness to bend down, pick up what was thrown away, and walk it in. If this story stayed with you, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world Maya's story reached you today. And if you know someone who has been told they do not belong somewhere they were born for, share this with them. Sometimes one story is enough to remind a person of what they already are. If this channel is not in your corner yet, subscribe, because there are more stories like this one, and I am not done telling them.